Hello and welcome to today's Trainer Education webinar, Accountability Now from Top to Bottom, hosted by HRDQ and presented by Linda Galindo. Today's webinar will last approximately an hour. Before we begin, note there is a question, maybe labeled as a chat box. It's usually located at the top right-hand corner of your screen. And we'll either answer your questions as they come in during the session, or after our session, Linda will respond directly to questions, and we will share that Q&A with everyone by email. My name is Sarah Montgomery, and I will moderate today's webinar. I'm in business development for HRDQ, a publisher of research-based training solutions that improve the performance of individuals, teams, and organizations. Our presenter today is none other than the Queen of Accountability, Linda Galindo. A recognized author, educator, speaker, and consultant, Linda specializes in accountability and high-performance executive team building. She is a faculty member of the Sundance Institute and the Institute for Management Studies. Linda is the author of the 85% Solution, How Personal Accountability Guarantees Success. No nonsense, no excuses, way to grow, as well as the Accountability Experience Workshop. We are very pleased to have Linda share her expertise with us today. Welcome, and thank you for joining us, Linda.
Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me for what I know you'll experience as an accountability hour of power that you will be able to use as soon as you leave this webinar provided by HRDQ. I invite you to have a feel-it experience in this webinar. I know a lot of us are used to multitasking and thinking that we can give our attention to more than one thing sometimes, but we don't get the full effect when we don't focus. So if you connect with this information, you'll be able to put it on authentically, connect with it, and use it right away. So I invite you to do that, and let's begin. I begin with asking you to imagine how your work life would improve if the people around you were more accountable. So if after this 1 hour you walked into a world and everyone in your work world were more accountable, how do things improve? So most people will say, yes, it absolutely be highly desirable if I had more accountability around me in other people. And when I ask, well, be specific, how would your work life improve? They often say, well, I would have less stress because I don't have to check on their work. I don't have to check on whether they're coming in on time. I don't have to babysit. There's higher quality in the work that they're producing. So I want you to first and foremost feel what it's like to have this condition in which people around you are more accountable and what you would get from that. Because that then begins the journey of seeing the ways in which you may be contributing to others around you not being as accountable as you would like them to be. So this journey begins with each of us looking at how we might be participating in having others around us not being as accountable as we would like them to be, to have that work environment you just imagined. Then ask yourself, am I the type of person who's had this thought? It's just easier to do it myself. I want other people to be accountable, but when I'm working with them, and maybe I'm their manager or supervisor or even coworker on a team, and something isn't getting done that the other person is accountable for. And what I do might be rescue, fix, and save that task or project or thing that is coming due or that person's work instead of hold that person accountable. And then wonder why sometimes in watching well-compensated employees not be held accountable and ask, why aren't they being held accountable? Well, it might be that there is this need to just take care of it, and people think it's just easier to do it myself. That mindset's pretty dangerous when we want to create more accountability around us, because if we just take care of it ourselves, we start creating this unaccountable culture. So increasing accountability begins with understanding what accountability is and how to apply the mindset of accountability in everyday life. I've already poked at mindset a little bit by saying, can you imagine a world where the people around you are more personally accountable? Is that desirable? Do you want that? But at the same time, do you sometimes think, well, it's just easier to do it myself, I'll take care of it, and so you're contributing to those people who are not being accountable continuing that behavior. It's a good place to begin to examine our contribution to where accountability is not present. We can all agree that a lack of accountability costs time and money. It costs us time because we're checking on the work of others, or we're running after, chasing down things that we need. And we're not doing the work that we're really there to do that enlivens us and contributes to us wanting to be at work and doing a good job. And because we're not doing that work, we're taking care of other things that other people are not taking their accountability for, well, then what we're getting paid to do really isn't getting realized. But most cultures that I work in will say, yes, I totally agree, a lack of accountability costs time and money. But what I'm finding is they're missing a word in that statement, and that's the word I work very hard to invite people to so that they can realize the power of accountability. And it is the lack of personal accountability that costs time and money. Most people think they are accountable. But as I give examples and provide the tools, what participants often experience is that it's getting very personal. And that's where the power of accountability can be utilized top to bottom every single day. So to give us the reason to go into something that's quite rigorous in our culture, and that is to embrace this value of accountability, all organizations in any kind of learning or program want a business case for it. We don't just sit people in a room and educate them. We want to know that because we've done this, there's a return on the investment of time and training and money and people coming in and learning. And when we make it very personal, it becomes very obvious what we get from it. So today you will learn the definitions of responsibility and accountability, but more than that, the language of this is very, very important. It is when we connect with it authentically and can just talk about it, not in cute new definitions, but in our own personal experience. So for some of us, this will be an affirmation. I've thought this way all along, and now I'm getting the words that affirm the way that I have wanted to bring this into my workplace and my day-to-day job. And then against that, I can use a checklist to measure my current accountability. How am I behaving this? I may think this way, but is my behavior matching up? And if it's not, what can I improve? And the value of clear agreements in accountability, one of the most important tools that to some is tedious and unnecessary, but when it's very, very important, accountability tells us we must get clear up front rather than chase down what we thought the agreement was with someone else to hold them accountable. And then the 3 keys to be an accountability influencer. So once again, once you're off the webinar, you can go to your day-to-day work and use the information right away, being influential. In order to be an accountability influencer, you really have to be clear about what accountability is, and you've got to see it as clearly as you see anything else in your life that you really, really want. Let me give you an example. I've put up the FedEx logo, and in the FedEx logo, there is an arrow, A-R-R-O-W. And I want you to imagine a room full of people in which this is up on the screen, and I ask, how many of you know there is an arrow in the FedEx logo? And everyone looks at it, and some hands go up. They're aware there is an arrow pointing in a direction embedded in the logo. And other people say, I don't see it. I've never seen it. And as a leader of an initiative that I want everyone to see and go in the same direction, it becomes important to say, well, some of you see it and some of you don't. In order for us to move in this direction, we all need to see it. We all need to see accountability to embrace it as a value in our culture. We all need to see quality or patient safety or whatever the initiative is we're talking about. And some people will sit in the meeting and listen to the description and look right at the screen and still not see it, but more importantly, they won't ask for help. They won't say, I don't see it, can you help me, where is it? And so the end of the meeting comes and they're still looking at the screen, they've heard all the explanations, and they've never leaned over to say to someone, can you help me so that I can be clear? They just sit there and say, I don't see it. To see accountability, you have to take a risk. You have to say, I'm not clear. I don't understand. I might be the only one in the room, but I'm willing to ask because I want to see it as everyone else is seeing it because they seem to be getting a benefit from it. Now, seeing the arrow in the FedEx logo is not life-changing. It is interesting, and there you have it. So some of you right now are going, oh, I've never seen that before. Has that always been there? Yes, it's always been there, just as accountability has always been there. But it's not a life-changing moment necessarily to see that there's something there that you've never seen before. What does happen is when you're driving down the road from now on and you had never seen this before and there's the FedEx truck, you say, oh, to a friend, have you ever noticed there's a arrow in the logo? And they see it and they utter the exclamation of, oh, you're so interesting, you're so smart that you know that. It is that you can pass on something that you can see now. And the magic of it is once you have authentically put it into your own way of day-to-day work and interaction with others, just like this logo and the arrow, you can't unsee it from now on. So every time you see this logo, you're going to see that arrow. Every time after you expose yourself to the idea of personal accountability, you won't be able to unsee it. You'll simply be making a choice. And sometimes that choice is not so simple. In order to absolutely use the concept, you have to be willing to sharpen your view of it. Some people think they see it. They think they're very accountable people. It's all these other people out there. But this will clarify getting all the fuzz out. And for those of us who wear prescription glasses, we know those glasses really, really help us. So the information I'm going to provide today is a kind of prescription to say, put this on and look at the world this way. And if you're willing to pick that up every day and look at it this way, you can get a tremendous result that's different than the results you're getting now. So we begin the process in total with defining what accountability is by examining our own thinking. And let's take a look at this quote to start that process. Individuals carry their success or failure with them. It does not depend on outside conditions. Individuals carry their success or failure with them. It does not depend on outside conditions. My question of you is, on a scale of 0 to 100%, how much is up to the individual for success? And how much of that 100% is outside conditions that impacts whether the individual can be successful? So if you walk into work and you say, I carry my success or failure with me, it does not depend on outside conditions, and then you say, and as I walk into work starting my day, I'm going to say how much of this day and the results I want are up to me and the success that I define for this day and how much is outside conditions. So make a note to yourself. Is it 50% up to me, 50% is the workplace? Is it 90% up to me? 10% is the workplace and outside conditions, my boss, how much time I've been given to do this, the resources, 75-25, maybe some of you are thinking 100-0. Of course, there's the other question to ask, and that is, what do you mean by success? Success is a really important definer in the process of adopting and internalizing accountability. One of the things I say all the time is, it's critical to understand how you are defining success. Because if individuals carry their success or failure with them, it doesn't depend on outside conditions, you're going to have a problem if your definition of success isn't your workplace definition of success. If your definition of success is to come in whenever I want, make as much money as I possibly can, and work all by myself, you got to ask yourself, that's a clear definition of success, but is it available here? And if the answer is no, you've got to make a decision. change your definition of success or find somewhere where your definition of success is available. So what I'm finding is I work with people to adopt this mindset of personal accountability. One of the first steps they have to make is define success for themselves. How much is up to me and how much is outside condition? And if I really want to be totally personally accountable for my success at work, which is a very desirable mindset, I've got to get really clear on what success is and then be accountable for it. Let's look at it another way, and how realistic is that people are living at 90-10 or 100-0, 85-15. If you were the person on the table getting the surgery, and you got to ask every person that was going to touch you, on a scale of 0 to 100%, how much personal accountability are you, surgeon, you, anesthesiologist, you, nurse, you, circulating nurse, how much personal accountability are you taking for a good outcome? And what answer do you want? Do you want them to say, well, 50-50. For my part of this, I'm here for you. I have 100%. But these other people, I can't control them. Sometimes they fight when you're asleep. Sometimes they don't get along. Sometimes they disagree on which knee they're even supposed to be operating on. But for me, I'm 100%. And in this top-to-bottom accountability, that kind of answer is not going to cut it. It's going to have to be an acknowledgement. Each of us has that 100% accountability available, answering for our results. And at the same time, each of us has it individually. An organization that's adopted accountability top to bottom, they have that answer collectively. And that shows up in how people interact with each other in the work they're doing. Maybe the surgeon's preoccupied on the financials, and he's thinking about the volumes that he has to get up in order for those financials to work in his practice. Or the nurse doesn't have what she needs in terms of the soft mat under her feet standing for hours. Or somebody wants to call something out that isn't quite right, but they're afraid of somebody they work with. All those conditions are real. All of those conditions can happen. This is just one example of many, many. There's probably as many examples as there are people listening to me today. But it is that thing that says, here's why I'm not 100, because I'm preoccupied by something else and can't control these other conditions. But what do we as a consumer want? We want the person that's involved, or for the patient, the people that are involved in our care, to be 100% on top of it. So the opportunity is to make sure that we get people back to thinking about what they're doing with others, 100 for me and 100 for all of us. So individual and collective at the same time. The surgeon in this case is thinking it's where I want to be, and I appreciate everyone else's skills here. I'm on top of it. We're on it from the nurse, and I feel more confident now that I know what this surgeon expects. So there's a completely different environment when the level of personal accountability per individual begins to increase instead of just for my part. To have that happen, the mindset we walk into is not part, sum, and share, but instead everyone is on the same page with high-performance accountability as a mindset. I am responsible, self-empowered, and accountable for understanding the role, the task, the deliverable, the due dates. It's up to me to be clear and successful in my role. And if obstacles or conflicting priorities arise, still up to me to gain focus and create greater effectiveness. It's a mindset. And page 19, if you make that note, of the 85% solution, I really reinforced how important this mindset is, that even if there are obstacles, there's conflicting priorities, there's people you can't control or get along with, your mindset doesn't move from not being other than responsible, self-empowered, and accountable for understanding and delivering on what you've agreed to in your role. There's no fault, there's no blame, there's no guilt. This is the mindset. On the 3x5 card, you read it before you go to work. You say, this is up to me, this 100% that I have available to me. How much of it am I going to use, or how much of it am I going to use other people as my excuse not to have my 100? Our roles are different, just as in that surgery. Our roles are different, but the availability of 100% personal accountability is the same for each and every one of us, and that is powerful, and that can be instilled top to bottom in organizations. So let's begin parsing this out with definitions of terms so that we come full circle on the definition of accountability and putting it in play in concert with these other aspects of what creates high-performance accountability. First is personal responsibility, and what's meant by that. It's a mindset before you do anything. So how are you thinking about this before you do it? I take this job in exchange for pay. 100-0, 80% is me, 20% is the workplace, 50-50. So there can be people with the exact same role in an organization. One has a mindset of 50-50 and the other has a mindset of 90-10. They're going to get different results using the same resources and even having the same boss. So a lot of us have not taken the time to check in with, of that 100% that maybe for the first time I'm hearing I have as a theoretical limit, I have 100% available to me. How much of that do I set in play the second I step out the door, the second I get into work, the second I sit down with the team or I'm in that meeting? How much of this getting the result I want is up to me and how much is outside condition? And I want to be very clear about something for this to work well. I'm not talking about the selfish me. I'm talking about the responsible I. So it is a personal ability to say my responsibility in total is mine, and it influences others the higher I own that level of responsibility. But society pushes back on it all the time. Take responsibility for my own life. Is that even legal? I realized as I began writing and talking about personal responsibility and having been a newscaster in my first life, how much of the time there was finger point and blame, and that was getting rewarded. People were listening to the story. Were you personally involved in this, and were you responsible? And in what way were you responsible? And somehow that being a scary thing to do, to say, I am responsible, I was involved. Well, if it's simply a mindset before we go into it and looking at it that way, I can use it right away because I'm the one who's asking myself that question to go into something so that I can then get the result I want. So it starts with responsibility going in, my mindset, how much of this is up to me and how much is outside condition, and a wonderful exercise to check in with everybody who's on my team or in my group. Here's the thing we have to accomplish. Let's do a check-in on our mindset. Do we own getting the result we're agreeing to fully? And then that prevents us from having to all the time live in a answer yes, but what we don't hear is yes, as long as you're nice to me, as long as I get the pay I want, as long as you know, all these things that were in my life before we started this don't change. Oftentimes we don't hear the as long as. And then society will say, well, if they didn't tell you all that, you're not responsible. And I beg to differ. I'd ask and invite people who want to live at this higher level of good results to take a check-in on, are we taking ownership going into this before we get started? And how close is that needle to 100%? And then once we check in on that and we get our average of how much is up to us and how much is outside condition, we have to act on it, and that's self-empowerment. We have to take action and risk to ensure the achievement of the result. So empowerment is the action during, and a distinction I make in empowerment is I don't ever talk about empowerment as other than something that is self-derived. I do not espouse that you can empower people to be more responsible and more accountable. You can empower people with skill and ability. You really have to go to this model in which self-empowerment is the only kind of empowerment there is. So I will lay out the parameters for you as an employee or for a group, or I as a manager will be very clear about what the expectations are and what those non-negotiables are. But now each individual takes that opportunity to say, I will be responsible for this, and I will self-empower. I will accept that I have to be to work on time, that I cannot use these resources, or I can have the authority to do this or this. So we have to separate empowerment from authority in order for this to be a usable concept. Empowerment is something that you only can do through deriving it through yourself. Authority is different. You can give authority. So my invitation is separate those two concepts, because the top has to understand that I can give authority, but empowerment is going to be something that's self-derived, and then create the environment for people to use their self-empowerment by stepping forward and taking risk, because empowerment, self-empowerment does require risk. I'll give you an example. One of the top behaviors I need from people who want this culture in which accountability is highly valued is to talk to, not about each other. Very, very important. Talk to, not about. But it requires a person to say, I have to have courage to go talk to you. I have to take a risk, because in the past I've talked about you behind your back because I'm frustrated with you. Self-empowerment means I'm going to stop doing the talking behind your back and I'm going to talk to you. Self-empowerment means I'm going to raise my hand and say, I don't see the arrow. I'm the only one. Can I please get clear? I have to take a risk and at times be a little bit vulnerable. And using the tools that associate with accountability and instilling it from top to bottom means that maybe you're going to feel a little bit like this, that you got to cross that space that feels like, are they going to attack me? Are they going to make fun of me? Am I going to be the only one? This is a little bit tedious and hard. You got to be brave to empower yourself. And it starts with, because I want to own this fully to get the result at the end, I've got to decide that my behaviors have to change in order to influence others to the same kind of behavior. But it's going to be risky because it's going to be new, because it's going to feel uncomfortable, because I'm not sure if people are going to support the new way that I'm going to be behaving and being accountable, because it's very, very different. Personal accountability then follows. So you start with personal responsibility, your mindset going into this endeavor, role, task, job that you have, and then you act on it, and everything is a choice to act on self-empowering, to be more toward responsible and accountable, or unempowering, where you're deciding that you're a victim of what's happening around you more and more. So as you're doing that, one way or the other, not good or bad, right or wrong, it's definitely dictating the result you're going to get coming out. And that's what you are personally accountable for, a willingness after to answer for the outcome you produced. No fault, no blame, no guilt. This is what I did. This is what I learned. Here's what I'll do differently. Here's how I am accountable. Debriefing things that don't go well where you're involved can be absent fault, blame, and guilt by using accountability. This is what I did. Here's what I learned. Here's what I would do differently. Here's how I'm accountable for that result. So it takes that really scary part of accountability where it feels like a bat or someone's going to blame you or finger point, and it moves it to something very, very powerful. Accountability is learning. I learned by saying the truth about what I did and what I learned from that and what I would do differently and how I will be accountable going into the future. It instills a lot of confidence and quality in the day-to-day actions we all take. This is not accountability, where we're sitting and listening and thinking that's never going to work, and I won't be to blame if I don't take ownership going in. I can point to someone else, tell them it was a bad idea. I was always the one who said that. This is where the line is drawn to invite people to this place of accountability that can be very, very powerful, and it is this, that when we're putting accountability into a culture, a workplace, an individual, a team, a group, as a value, we ask the group to really look at not changing the definition of accountability, working, not working. Keep it exactly the same, that accountability is ownership for our results, good or bad, and that we accepted going in as much as we could understand and clarify to get this down. And then you can have accountability right now if that's your mindset. Your questions change and your clarity going in changes. So this picture that you see now is the model in simple terms. Going into it, I start with responsibility. Where is that scale for you? Is it pretty much mostly I guess, or is it yes, this is up to me and I'm responsible for it? And then as you act on it in that second arrow, you act on taking the risk to clarify, to talk to people, not about them, and to not have meetings after the meeting, and to get clear, and to be less worried about your position in the organization and more about asking what you need to ask in order for the result to come out, and being clear about the result. And then once that result is produced, the third phase of being accountable and answering for it without fault and blame and guilt. And at the center of that, accountability is clear agreement. And clear agreement up front keeps us from being surprised at the end about what actually showed up. So every one of us walks into our work life with a mindset, and some more toward victim mindset where there's a lack of ownership. I show up, I blink, I breathe, and then you give me a paycheck, but then everybody's talking about me behind my back and resentful of me. Or I'm in the change agent category where the more personal responsibility and personal accountability I live and take ownership and act, I'm going to be creative and I'm going to answer for results. You start to see a group of people really producing exceptional performance and results. So you can see the problem if you have 3 or 4 people who are more in the range of 85 to 90% responsibility and accountability. It's up to them in their mind. And then 55, 65% people walk into that same group and they don't fit in, is often how I hear it expressed. But really it is they don't have the same mindset about accountability, and that expectation often is not set by example and not set by learning and explanation. So that's why we take a snapshot using an assessment of what we're dealing with. And I find this all quite fascinating. You can often tell what you're dealing with when you listen to people and they make excuses for their behavior or performance. They make excuses or have reasons why they didn't get the result, versus people who know they didn't get the result, but they offer a solution, or they renegotiate, or they make sure they stay on task and offer ways that this can get done even though it didn't work perfectly. Well, to some extent, because you can listen to people and guess that, or you have experience with them, you know whether they're lower or higher on responsibility and accountability. But there's another way for you to know, because oftentimes we self-justify. And if we really wanted to take a snapshot, well, we could just take an image of a picture to see, are we as responsible and as accountable as we think we are? And so there is an opportunity to take a mini assessment online. Just go to the 85% solution, and it'll give you an insight. Where are you starting from? Because maybe you're listening to this webinar saying, I'm very accountable. It's these other people. Make sure that you are very accountable is a true statement, that you're taking a snapshot and you're being very honest about those components of your behavior that really line up with being someone who is accountable and therefore influences the accountability of others. So I invite you to be honest and take a look at that. How much is up to me? How much is outside condition? On the surface, I know what the answer is supposed to be, but when I really look a little deeper at the kinds of questions like I'm totally responsible for my success at work, and I can't strongly agree to that. Do I talk about why I can't, so that I can see those places where I start to offer excuses rather than total personal responsibility for being successful? So as we build accountability top to bottom in an organization, it begins with that assessment. It says, well, let's see what we're dealing with. I come in at 90-10 or 100-0, and then these other people are lower. Well, it starts then with being willing, as in team building, to start holding each other accountable. That becomes a very important practice, because if we don't hold each other accountable, get very clear about that thing we're working on together and the pieces and parts that make it happen, we're not very clear about that and we don't stop to get clear, what tends to happen is we create a culture in which rescue, fixing, and saving is rewarded more than being accountable. So we get it done and we come through at the end, but then you have a culture that rewards heroics and rewards rescue, fixing, and saving. And again, if you participate that way, it's very important to acknowledge then you are one of those people who enables and affirms that kind of culture. If you stop for a second and say, hold on, I'm not going to take care of this. Now, obviously, for the customer, at the moment it's happening, you want to do that. But after the fact, you want to have that conversation that says, not anymore. I've allowed this to happen, and I need to stop. And it's so important today and in today's work environment with less resources in the economy, and we're really stretched, more important than it has ever been in the 20 years that I've been teaching this. Because here's what I've really come to discover. If you don't hold your underperformers accountable, you simply rescue, fix, and save it, you punish your best performers. If you have that mindset, it's just easier to do it myself, people are not developing. Yes, the harder thing to do is to stop for a second and say, Ellen, I've let this happen, and I need to stop doing it. Let's go back to going into this, do you own this fully? What resources and support do you need to be clear about what's expected of you? And then I act on that and have that conversation, and then I answer for it. And then I let Ellen know the same is going to go for you. It needs to stop this thing that we do, this little dance that we dance where I rescue, fix, and save. Now, in order to do that and to feel the full implication of instilling this and stopping a behavior that's keeping people at the rescue, fix, and save level, you might have to give up being liked. You know, I like my boss because she rescues, fixes, and saves the things that I don't get right. She stays late. I go home. She's sensitive to my needs. I have a family. Yeah, but I don't want to give that up for your lack of development because I'm taking care of it. That stops. It absolutely punishes the best performers. You know that intuitively and by experience. You know it because you go to people where that work that's not getting done, it's easier to do it myself or to get the people who step up and take care of things to do it, but they end up getting punished with additional work. And maybe some of you listening are that person that's getting punished with the additional work because those individuals are not being held accountable. It's time to stop and to walk in and say, I need to understand something. If I do my work and then I get the work of others because they're not doing it, I need input on how to better handle that, because what's happening is I'm absolutely getting demotivated. This is not an environment I want to be in. I'm one of the best performers. The other thing that happens is often this is the person in the room that's in the meeting with the manager, and the manager is saying all of us need to step it up and be more accountable to get things in on time, to do those reports, to get those things done that we've all agreed have to be done. Well, the best performers are sitting in that room saying, I do all this, and I don't understand why this is the 8th time I've had to be in this meeting when it's 2 people who this manager doesn't want to talk directly to and hold accountable, instead does it in a group setting, feels safer, maybe we'll put pressure on them, and we can stop having these meetings. The best performers will be looking to leave because they don't need to be in an environment of babysitting. They want to be in an environment of development and growth and engagement. And so it teaches us, if we understand accountability, that treating everyone the same is not the same as being fair. It's treating people according to their level of accountability. And when they answer for their results and they come to us with solutions and they have a high level of responsibility, empowerment, and accountability, we can give them those things that challenge them, grow, and develop them. People who are lower on their level of personal responsibility and personal accountability always have an excuse. They need to be managed. So we have to treat these things differently in order to retain them and to grow them and to develop them. But for those of you who have to get out of that rescue, fix, and save mode, I don't envy your challenge, but it's absolutely necessary if you want to instill accountability. So let's talk about the practicality of it, the behavior list, to say, how do you measure up? You could do this alone, just score yourself. You could do it in a small group to see how your group or team is doing. You could think about your culture, and you might say, well, for these things, I'm a 5, but if you ask, in the company, they're the problem. Well, that's like talking about the Titanic. That's like saying, my deck chairs are straight, it's all these other people and all this other stuff that's going on that is the problem. You don't want to go there. You want to make sure that first this applies to you, and then you make sure that you can bring it to the group to say, are we at 5s on each of these things? We talk to, not about. So I talk to, not about others. Give myself a 5 if I'm good with that. I don't have a meeting after the meeting. I don't participate in those meetings after the meeting. I use clear agreements, and there's all kinds of tools for those. We certainly offer one, but that when it's important and you have a high performer, use the clear agreement. I really discourage using clear agreement forms with low performers because they'll tend to want to get you on a technicality. Clear agreements for those who want to own it fully and really be developed so you can be very clear with them and then let it go. Meeting agenda clarity so we're not wasting time. Clear roles and making a distinction about what their authority of people is versus whether they're empowered or not. That leadership sets and agrees on priorities. There is alignment, communication, and trust in the organization. That accountability is a learning tool. So we look back at things and use a worksheet to communicate that we've learned from it and put it in writing and teach it to others. But it is not a bad, it's not negative, it's not scary. It's what we learn from. So ways to look back and debrief without anybody being blamed. Definition of success is clear along with what the goal is. So we talked about definition of success. You have goals, but I want to make the distinction. Page 90 of the 85% solution goes in depth about having a definition of success. Many participants give me feedback that's a defining moment for them to being totally personally accountable for their success at work. Don't rescue, fix, and save. That starts to keep people not able to develop. Make sure that you say, I've allowed this, I'm not going to anymore. And I'm going to hold people, myself first, and then others accountable. And how well do I do that? That I'm conflict competent, that I don't run from what I think is an accountability conversation that's going to be scary because there's going to be a conflict. Lots and lots and lots of tools out there to learn to get into conflicts that are not mean and disruptive and angry, but really there's a competence to it and that you're fine and that you can do this. That you have cultural competence and mutual respect. That is that we have lots of different cultures that interdepend in organizations. And those cultures have to interdepend, and we have the same respect for the help desk person in IT as we do for the engineer who designed, whatever the help desk is getting calls on. That yes, we have different levels, but we all are valuable, and then we demonstrate mutual respect, and we understand the different cultures and use the best of all of it to get it done. And that we're transparent. Accountability is transparency. And that is that people can see how I spend my time. I don't have a problem with them looking at when I say I'm busy and I don't have enough time to do things, that they can actually see how I'm spending my time to give me input or to help me prioritize. And this really helps us to stop managing to activity and really focusing on results. So that list of behaviors in an organization, getting 4s and 5s, you're going to have a high-performance organization, a very accountable set of people, a very accountable individual. If you scored yourself all 5s, I would ask you to bring it to your teammates and see if they think the same thing about you. So it's important to get feedback, too. So from that, you could ask yourself, well, what do I need to work on? Or what do we need to work on as a team? So that's a very practical tool to go back with, to say, if we want accountability, are we living up to 5s in each of these areas? And feel free to take any of them that don't work in your culture off. But it, no matter what, has to start with you and looking at yourself. So take a hard look and then get feedback from others as well. And when you see the weaknesses and being closer to that 100% personal responsibility, personal accountability, don't deny, deflect, or delay. Get to what has to be worked on in yourself or your group and get to 5s. Because otherwise it just has that lack of energy and engagement in the culture and everybody's kind of wandering around. So when you get down to how do I influence accountability, it begins with seeing accountability as individual and collective at the same time. That anything you're unclear about is your responsibility to get clear. You're sitting in a room or a meeting and people are saying stuff, raise your hand and say, I want to own this fully. I want to be accountable, so I have a clarifying question. And get over that fear and be brave. Don't have meetings after the meeting. It's unprofessional, and this is the meeting where you stir it up, not the one where you're implementing what we agreed to. But really don't go there, and it totally undermines you being experienced as an accountable person. Individual and collective at the same time, so hold each other accountable. Don't rescue, fix, and save each other. That would be very powerful. Everyone has 100% available. Remember that. Role clarity is essential. So I have 100% for my role. It interdepends with your role. You don't want to get on an airplane and have the pilot say, I pretty much mostly think we're going to get to New York. My role is pilot, and we have other people here as committed to safety and getting us there safely, and we're all clear about where we're going. It's essential. Empowerment and authority are different, and that's very important to understand going forward. In influencing accountability, make sure that you remember control stifles empowerment. So if you're a micromanager and kind of a control freak, it's hard to work for and with you. I would say that I still want you to be very, very clear, but not necessarily controlling. And how that's best accomplished in this culture in which accountability is highly valued is that you make clear what's negotiable and what's not negotiable. Another way of saying set clear expectations. So there are things that you might say to people, we want you to take ownership and do. But if I'm not clear, are there any parameters here? I'm going to empower myself to ask that clarifying question and say, is this negotiable? Is this negotiable? What is the non-negotiable here? Now, a lot of people don't get clear because then they can make it the job they want to do, not the one that needs to get done. So often when I'm in organizations and listening to some of these meetings, I say, why didn't anybody ask a clarifying question? And someone will say, oh, I know why no one clarifies, because when you clarify, they see it as a challenge. I've seen it happen. Somebody raises their hand, asks this clarifying question, and they go in this room somewhere, and then they never come out. So it's sort of this influencing accountability and clarity is this mythological, told the story a million times about what happened to someone going into a room and never coming out because they were trying to get clear. Well, just make sure that in your self-empowering mode, you're also using good communication skills. You don't have a tone that goes with that because you want to influence them to be clear with you. And if you're not sure you have a tone or a problem communicating, ask at home. For free, you will get executive coaching. Because lots of times I see people trying to get clear so they can take ownership going in and be accountable, but their tone and their communication is a problem. And so you have to make sure that that isn't what's getting in your way, and empower yourself beyond it with education and learning. Everybody's wondering what's next in terms of the economy and the global situation, and then we get very myopic on our own job. And I have now learned after these many years that developing your professional definition of success is second to none in making sure that you're going to be okay no matter what's next. Because then you can gauge those things that you can take. And as a manager and a supervisor, as a leader of any type, being committed to the success of someone else is fantastic in terms of loyalty and development and having them do a really, really good job. But in order to be committed to someone else's success, you have to be clear what it is, and you can't be judgmental. You just invite them, because then they're invited to be accountable for their own success. Many, many, many people don't define success. They just talk about happy and unhappy. Very hard to support and to encourage and to instill good practices if I don't know it. There are many excuses as we get closer and closer to accountability that people want out because it doesn't feel very comfortable. So they'll say, I wasn't clear, I didn't understand. That's where the clear agreement can really help to say up front, let's make sure that doesn't happen. And I'm not doing it to catch you. I'm doing it because I want to trust that I was clear with you. That clear agreement that I use, you write things down, and people say, well, why are you writing this down? You don't write it down when it's Mary, and they start comparing themselves with what I'm doing with other people. Well, it isn't that, first of all, I'm not going to have a conversation about Mary. I'm often tempted to say, well, I write everything down with you because I like Mary better than you. Well, they're misunderstanding. Not at all. That isn't the case. I don't talk about Mary. I say I'm writing this down to get clear so I can let go to you and really let you own this and take action on it and then answer for it. So the opportunity is get clear up front. Again, I don't do it with people who need a high level of managing and caretaking. I make sure I do it with my highest performers because they need to be able to get clear in a safe environment and tell me what they don't understand so that we can have a really professional conversation about it and they can have the highest level of accountability going in possible so they get their result. Then I often hear, well, we've tried that and it doesn't work. And that's where I say, well, then what did you learn from that? And if they can't tell me what they learned specifically, just generally it didn't work, I'm going to pull them back into looking back and using that as learning so that accountability, once again, doesn't feel negative. And finally, there's not enough time. The clear agreement actually helps me with that, as does transparency. But did we really allot appropriate time and renegotiation in the event that other things showed up? And they will. So the reality is I understand priorities change, but we must communicate with each other when they do so that not enough time is not our excuse. We have to remember as we go into the accountability application to ourselves that we're going to have to let go of some things and change. And that's best illustrated by this story that I learned when I married my husband. I combined households with my husband. We've been married 12 years now, but in those first few weeks of marriage, I was pretty set on my ways and how things are to be done, and one way is my way. The other day he yelled upstairs, Linda, come here. I want my opinion on this. And I just laughed my head off. I said, really? He goes, yeah, I'm just waiting until I see, what's your way. And we don't want that kind of environment in our workplaces. In my home, it works great. But no, out in the workplace, we don't want that. We want people to think and do and learn and grow. Well, when I went out to mow the lawn the very first time in our marriage, he came running out of the house, maybe 3 minutes into the whole thing, and he says, turn off the mower. He's yelling at me, and I turned the mower off. And he said, that's not how you mow a lawn. And I said, excuse me? And he said, no. You need rows, Linda. Make the rows. Go up this way and then come around. And I said, you need to stop. You know what? Our definition of success for lawn mowing appears to be different. Here's mine. The blade hits the grass. The order in which that occurs, unimportant. It's all shorter when I'm done. And he just, well, this is what he did. He just fell all out. He was like, oh my gosh, I've married this woman who doesn't know how to mow a lawn. He said, look at Rick's lawn across the way. Look at it. It's got lines. And I said, Rick's got some kind of weird problem. Planes are not landing according to the lines in the lawn. Let it go. When it's my turn, definition of success is all shorter. When it's your turn, have lines in the lawn. So as we get into the way things are to be done and be accountable, we start getting really married to the how we do it, and that might shut people down. Are you clear on the result? And that we both have the same definition of success. So not life-changing, but then 3 days later, he came in the living room and asked me what I was doing, and I explained folding the towels. And he asked me, didn't the girls fold these earlier? And I said, yes, but they weren't folded right. If you fold them in threes, they fit in the closet, the inventory's clear. I explained very passionately with my illustration right there, this is how you fold towels. His definition of success for towel folding, the towel door closed after the girls were done folding them. So we had that to contend with, and I really was impassioned telling him folding them in threes worked better and why. And he said, I have one word for you, lawn. And that's when I realized at work there are times when I want people to be accountable for a result, but I fail to say, and it has to be exactly like this. And sometimes exactly like this is just because that's the way I do it. It has no rhyme or reason to getting to the result. And so what I would say to people who are trying to put the value of accountability top to bottom, please make a distinction between what is absolutely necessary and non-negotiable, or really I want you to do it so that you get the result, and let's make a clear agreement about what that is going in, and stop all this how and process difference, because sometimes it just leads to a big culture clash, and we're so busy dealing with that we can't deal with the competition ahead. So again, look at your role and where you might participate in that. It is a brave new world ahead. I leave you with, you can't mandate accountability. You can only demonstrate it, and it gets very, very personal. And it just because someone's at a position level of leadership doesn't mean they're more accountable. They have to be living their ownership going into something, this job I hold, and acting on it with risk, but self-empowering and understanding their authority and then answering for it, with the center point of that being what's my clear agreement with people as I go. The last thing that we want to do with really good information that motivates you and excites you and says, I can do this and get a better result. This is in my total control to be able to improve my level of personal responsibility and accountability and therefore have influence. And now I have a mindset that's shifted a little bit, and I have tools and I have ideas. Don't go back into the workplace, as this manager in my cartoon does, and lay it out on everybody else. I always say, once you're first exposed and you're going to improve yourself, just as any new learning I get, leave them alone. Instill it in yourself personally, and then make your difference. I read a great African proverb recently, and it said, if you don't think little things make a difference, spend the night with a mosquito in your room. So every little thing that you do is actually a very big thing, because it ups your level of personal accountability and sets the example. And that example is hard won. It's hard to find. So once you start applying this to yourself, you become a leader regardless of your position. You become an influencer, and people want to follow you. Is it rigorous? Yes. In my office, there's a little card. I read it every day. It says, be brave. Because, again, society is rewarding not being accountable more than being accountable. And my invitation to you, do this webinar, and what we do day to day is to live your highest and best, totally personal, accountable self. I turn it back to you, Sarah. Thank you very much, all of you who are listening, for your time. And Sarah has one more message for you, but really great to be with you today.
Thank you so much, Linda, and thank you to everyone on the line. If you have any questions for Linda, I know we've had some really good ones come in throughout the presentation, but if you have any questions for Linda, now would be the time to go ahead and send those in. Like I mentioned at the beginning, we will we'll pull those all together. Linda's going to respond to each question, and then we will email that out to everyone. So you'll be able to see the questions that were asked and then Linda's responses as well. Today's presentation does give you the highlights from the Accountability Experience, a comprehensive learning solution that combines self-assessment and then also classroom training. It really helps individuals measure and develop their commitment to accountability in the workplace. For participating in today's webinar, you are eligible for an exclusive offer. For a limited time, you can get both the Accountability Experience Facilitator Set and then also the book, the 85% Solution, at a 40% discount. You want to use the coupon code AccountWebinar, and you can use that from now through October 5th, so don't miss out. Again, feel free to keep sending in those great questions for Linda, and we absolutely appreciate your time, and we hope you found today's webinar to be informative.